The small mountain town of Cedar Ridge had always been quiet, but lately it felt like a ghost town. The old general store sat empty, its windows dusty and cracked. The diner that once served the best apple pie in 3 counties now had a "for sale" sign that had been there so long the paint was fading. But there was one place that still drew people from miles around: Marcus Sullivan's hardware store. Marcus was 35 years old and had inherited the store from his father when he was just 22. For 13 years he had run it alone, never taking a partner, never hiring help, and most importantly, never getting married. The townspeople whispered about him constantly. Some said he was too picky. Others claimed he was scared of commitment. A few even suggested he preferred being alone to dealing with the complications of love. The truth was more complex than anyone knew. Marcus had been engaged once to a woman named Rebecca who had promised to love him forever. She had stayed until the store started struggling during the economic downturn 5 years ago. When money got tight and the future looked uncertain, Rebecca had quietly packed her bags and moved to the city without even saying goodbye. She left only a note that said she needed someone who could provide security. Not someone who was barely keeping his own business alive. Since then, Marcus had built walls around his heart that seemed impossible to break down. He threw himself into his work, arriving at the store before dawn and staying until well after sunset. The hardware store became his life, his identity, and his fortress against the world. He was polite to customers but never friendly. He helped people find what they needed but never made small talk. He had created a life where he was safe from disappointment. But he was also desperately lonely. The people of Cedar Ridge noticed his isolation, and many families worried about him. Mrs. Henderson from the post office often said he was too young to give up on love. Mr. Peterson from the bank frequently mentioned that Marcus needed a good woman to help him with the business. Even Pastor Williams had tried to introduce him to various single women from neighboring towns. But Marcus always found polite ways to decline their invitations. What made things worse was that many women genuinely wanted to get to know him better. Marcus was handsome in a rugged way, with dark hair that was always slightly messy from working with his hands, and green eyes that seemed to hold depths of emotion he never expressed. He was tall and strong from years of lifting heavy equipment and materials. More importantly, he was honest, hardworking, and had a reputation for treating everyone fairly. Despite his cold exterior, women could sense there was something special about him. Sarah Mitchell was the first to really try. She was a teacher who had moved to Cedar Ridge to work at the elementary school. She was pretty, smart, and genuinely kind. For weeks, she found excuses to visit the hardware store. She needed screws for a picture frame, then a hammer for a small repair, then paint for her classroom walls. Each time she tried to start conversations with Marcus, asking about his day, commenting on the weather, or sharing stories about her students. Marcus was polite but distant. He would find exactly what she needed, ring up her purchase, and thank her for her business. When Sarah finally gathered the courage to ask if he would like to have coffee sometime, Marcus looked uncomfortable and said he was too busy with the store. Sarah left feeling embarrassed and confused. She had been sure there was some connection between them, but Marcus acted as if she was just another customer. Next was Jennifer Adams, who worked as a nurse at the county hospital. She was older than Sarah, more confident and more direct. Jennifer didn't make excuses to visit the store. Instead, she walked in one Saturday morning and told Marcus, straight out, that she found him attractive and would like to get to know him better. She suggested they could start with a simple dinner at the diner down the street. Marcus appreciated her honesty but still said no. He explained that he wasn't looking for a relationship and preferred to keep his life simple. Jennifer pressed a little, asking if there was someone else or if she had done something wrong. Marcus assured her that she seemed like a wonderful person, but he just wasn't interested in dating anyone. Jennifer left frustrated, telling her friends that Marcus Sullivan was impossible to understand. Word spread quickly in the small town. Other women who had been thinking about approaching Marcus began to reconsider. If someone as lovely as Sarah and as confident as Jennifer couldn't get his attention, what chance did anyone else have? The consensus became that Marcus Sullivan was simply not interested in women, Or perhaps he was still mourning some lost love from his past, but the women kept trying. There was Linda from the bank, who offered to help him with his business finances over dinner. There was Carol from the church, who invited him to be her partner at the annual community dance. There was even Susan, who owned the flower shop and brought him fresh arrangements every week, hoping that her thoughtfulness might soften his heart. Each woman was turned away politely but firmly. Marcus never gave anyone false hope or led anyone on. He was clear about his lack of interest. Even when it obviously hurt their feelings, the rejections became legendary in Cedar Ridge. People started keeping track of how many women had tried and failed to win Marcus Sullivan's attention. Some felt sorry for him, believing he was missing out on happiness. Others felt sorry for the women, who were all attractive, accomplished, and deserving of love. A few people started to wonder if Marcus might be dealing with some deeper issue that prevented him from connecting with others. Marcus was aware of the talk, but he tried not to let it bother him. He told himself that he was protecting both himself and these women from future disappointment. He had learned that love could disappear when times got tough, and he wasn't willing to risk that kind of pain again. It was easier to be alone than to open his heart and watch someone walk away when things got difficult. The hardware store continued to be successful despite Marcus's personal isolation. He had a reputation for fair prices, quality products, and expert knowledge about repairs and construction. Contractors from several towns relied on his advice and trusted his recommendations. He had managed to pay off the debts that had accumulated during the hard years and was even starting to save money again. In purely practical terms, his life was going well, but late at night, when the store was closed and the town was quiet, Marcus sometimes felt the weight of his loneliness pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. He would sit in his small apartment above the store, eating dinner alone while watching old movies or reading books about business management. He had convinced himself that this was enough, that he didn't need anyone else to be happy. Yet there were moments when he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake by shutting out everyone who tried to get close to him. The pattern seemed set in stone. Marcus Sullivan was the man no woman could reach, and every woman in Cedar Ridge had given up trying. The townspeople had accepted that their local hardware store owner was destined to remain a bachelor forever. Even the most optimistic romantics had stopped trying to play matchmaker. Marcus had successfully created a life where no one expected anything from him except quality hardware and fair prices. Then, everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning in October when a woman none of them had ever seen before walked into the hardware store. She didn't look like the other women who had tried to win Marcus's attention. She wasn't dressed up or trying to impress anyone. She wore old jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she had dirt under her fingernails. She looked like someone who actually used tools instead of someone who was just looking for an excuse to flirt, but there was something about her that made Marcus look twice. Maybe it was the determined way she walked, or the confident way she surveyed his store, or the fact that she seemed completely unimpressed by him personally. She didn't smile flirtatiously or try to make small talk. Instead, she pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and started reading. From what was obviously a very specific list of supplies, this woman was different. And Marcus sensed that his carefully ordered world was about to be turned upside down. The woman walked directly to the counter without browsing or looking around like most customers did. She unfolded her piece of paper and began reading in a clear, businesslike voice. I need 2-inch galvanized steel pipes 12 feet long, 4 of them. I also need PVC elbow joints, 3/4-inch diameter, about 20 pieces. Do you have copper fittings for a well pump system? And I'm looking for waterproof electrical connectors rated for outdoor use. Marcus stared at her for a moment. In all his years running the store, he had never heard a woman rattle off such a technical list with such confidence. Most people, including many men, would ask for some pipes or stuff to fix a leak. This woman knew exactly what she wanted and used the correct terminology for everything. You're installing a well system? He asked, genuinely curious despite himself. Replacing one, she said without looking up from her list. The old pump died last week, and the pipes are corroded beyond repair. I've got about 3 days of water left in my storage tank, so I need to move fast. She finally looked up at him, and Marcus noticed her eyes were a striking blue-gray color like storm clouds. There was no nonsense in her expression, no attempt at charm or flirtation. She was simply a customer who needed supplies and wanted to get her business done efficiently. "I'm Elena Rodriguez," she said, extending a work-calloused hand. "I bought the old Henderson place about 5 miles up Canyon Road. Been working on fixing it up for the past 6 months. Marcus shook her hand, surprised by her firm grip. "Marcus Sullivan. I own this place. The Henderson property has been empty for years." "That's a big project you've taken on." Elena shrugged. "I like challenges. And I got a good price because everyone else was scared of the amount of work it needed." As Marcus gathered her supplies, he found himself asking questions he normally wouldn't bother with. Most of his interactions with customers were purely transactional, but something about Elena's practical approach made him curious. "Are you doing the work yourself?" he asked while counting out the PVC joints. "Most of it. I grew up helping my father with construction projects. He always said if you want something done right, you better know how to do it yourself." She examined one of the steel pipes he had selected. "This looks good. What about the electrical connectors?" Marcus showed her several options, explaining the differences in quality and weather resistance. Elena listened carefully, asked intelligent questions about amperage ratings and waterproof seals, and made her decisions quickly. She clearly understood what she was buying and why she needed it. "You know," Marcus said as he calculated her total, "most people would hire a contractor for this kind of work." Elena smiled for the first time since entering the store. "Most people also pay contractors 3 times what the materials cost and then complain when the work isn't done right. I'd rather do it myself and know it's done properly." Something about her attitude reminded Marcus of himself. He had always preferred to handle things independently rather than rely on others who might let him down. But he had never met a woman who seemed to share that philosophy so completely. "This comes to $437, he said. Ringing up her purchase, Elena pulled out a worn leather wallet and counted out exact cash. "I'll probably be back in a few days. Old houses always surprise you with additional problems." "I'll be here," Marcus said, then felt oddly disappointed as she loaded her supplies into a battered pickup truck and drove away. True to her word, Elena returned 3 days later. This time she needed replacement parts for her electrical panel and materials to repair a section of roof that had started leaking during the previous night's storm. Again, she knew exactly what she wanted and handled the transaction with efficient professionalism. "How's the well project going?" Marcus asked as he helped her load heavy electrical components. "Finished yesterday. Water pressure is better than it was with the old system." She paused at the door of her truck. "Actually, I have a question. Do you know anything about restoring old wood floors?" "Some. What kind of wood?" "Original pine planks, probably 80 years old. They're in decent shape structurally, but the finish is completely shot." Marcus found himself explaining different approaches to floor restoration, discussing the merits of sanding versus chemical stripping, and recommending specific products for refinishing. Elena listened attentively and asked follow-up questions that showed she understood the technical aspects of the work. "Thanks," she said when he finished explaining. "I'll probably try the sanding approach first. If you need to rent a floor sander, Peterson's Equipment Rental has good machines," Marcus offered. "Already called them. Picking one up tomorrow morning." As Elena drove away again, Marcus realized he had enjoyed their conversation more than any interaction he'd had with a customer in months. There was something refreshing about talking to someone who approached problems practically and wasn't trying to impress him or win his approval. Over the following weeks, Elena became a regular customer. She was working on different sections of her house and seemed to tackle each project methodically and competently. She replaced plumbing fixtures, rewired electrical outlets, repaired damaged siding, and even rebuilt a section of foundation that had been undermined by water damage, Marcus began looking forward to her visits. She never stayed long or engaged in unnecessary small talk, but their conversations about construction, techniques, and problem-solving were more interesting than most of the interactions he had with other people. Elena had practical experience with a wide range of repairs and wasn't afraid to admit when she didn't know something. "I'm having trouble with the kitchen sink," she said during one visit. "The drain keeps backing up, and I can't figure out why." "Could be tree roots in the main line," Marcus suggested. "That's common in older houses. You might need to have someone run a camera down the pipe to see what's blocking it." "I was hoping to avoid calling a plumber," Elena said. "But I guess some jobs require professional equipment." "Actually, there's a guy named Tom Barrett who rents drain cleaning equipment. Former plumber who retired but still helps people with difficult jobs. Much cheaper than a full-service call." Elena looked interested. "Would he be willing to teach me how to use the equipment myself?" Marcus laughed before he could stop himself. "Most people want someone else to deal with sewage problems." "I'm not most people," Elena said matter-of-factly. "And I learn more by doing things myself." That afternoon, Marcus surprised himself by calling Tom Barrett and arranging for him to meet with Elena. He had never gone out of his way to help a customer, beyond providing supplies and basic advice. But something about Elena's determination to handle her own problems impressed him when Elena came back to thank him for the referral. She seemed genuinely surprised by his effort to help her. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "But I appreciate it. Tom was great. He taught me how to use the equipment and explained what to look for in old drain systems." "Did you solve the problem?" Marcus asked. "Tree roots, just like you thought. And a section of pipe that had partially collapsed. I managed to clear the blockage and patch the pipe, but I'll probably need to replace that whole section eventually." Marcus found himself admiring her practical approach to homeownership. Most people would have panic about sewage problems and paid whatever it cost to have someone else fix them immediately. Elena had taken the time to understand the issue and develop both a short-term solution and a long-term plan. Their relationship remained professional, but Marcus began to notice small changes in himself. He looked forward to Elena's visits and found himself thinking about her projects even when she wasn't there. When she mentioned problems she was working on, he would sometimes research solutions and have suggestions ready for her next visit. Elena never flirted with him or showed any personal interest beyond their business interactions. She didn't ask about his life or try to extend their conversations beyond the topics they were discussing. In many ways, she treated him exactly the way he had always wanted customers to treat him, with respect for his expertise but no expectations of personal connection. Yet Marcus found himself wishing their interactions could be more personal. He began to wonder about Elena's life outside of her renovation projects. Why had she chosen to buy a rundown house in the middle of nowhere? Where had she learned so much about construction and repair work? Why was she doing all this work alone? The questions puzzled him because he had spent years avoiding personal connections with customers. He had trained himself to focus purely on business and not wonder about people's lives or motivations. But Elena was different somehow. Her competence and independence intrigued him in ways that traditional feminine charm never had. One Friday afternoon, Elena came in looking frustrated for the first time since he had met her. "Bad day?" Marcus asked as she approached the counter. "Expensive day," Elena said. "I need to replace my hot water heater, and the one I can afford isn't going to fit in the space where the old one was installed." "What's the problem with the space?" "The previous owners added a storage closet that blocks access to the original installation area. I can either tear out the closet, which means losing storage space I need, or find a different location for the water heater, which means running new gas and water lines." 2 weeks passed before Elena returned to the store. When she walked in, Marcus noticed she looked tired and her hands were more scraped up than usual. She moved directly to the counter with her typical efficiency, but something seemed different about her demeanor. "I need to place a special order," she said without her usual pleasantries. "Industrial-grade plumbing supplies. I've got a major problem with my main water line." "What happened?" Marcus asked, genuinely concerned. Elena sighed. And for the first time since he had met her, she seemed frustrated with a project beyond her abilities to handle alone. The county inspector came out yesterday for my electrical work approval. Everything I did passed inspection, but he noticed water damage in the basement that suggests the main line has been leaking for months, maybe years. The previous owners covered it up instead of fixing it. That's not something you can patch temporarily, Marcus said. I know. I need to excavate the whole line from the house to the road connection. 600 feet of new pipe, plus all the fittings and connections. And I need it done before winter or the damaged section could freeze and burst completely. Marcus calculated the scope of work Elena was describing. It would require heavy equipment to dig the trench, specialized tools for connecting to the county water main, and careful coordination with utility companies to avoid damaging other buried lines. Even for an experienced contractor, it would be an expensive and challenging job. Elena, he said carefully, this might be the kind of project where hiring professionals makes sense. The connection to the main line requires permits and certified installation. Elena's expression hardened slightly. Everyone keeps telling me that. The inspector, the guy at the rental company, even my insurance agent. They all think I should hire a contractor and take out a loan to pay for it. It's not about what you're capable of doing, Marcus said. It's about liability and safety regulations. The contractor quotes I've received are between $15,000 and $20,000. I don't have that kind of money, and I'm not willing to go into debt for something I can figure out how to do myself. Marcus studied Elena's face. He could see the stubborn determination that had carried her through months of difficult renovation work, but he could also see something else, a vulnerability she was trying hard to hide. This project was pushing her to her financial and emotional limits. What if I helped you? He heard himself say. Elena looked surprised. What do you mean? Marcus wasn't entirely sure what he meant. He had never offered to help a customer with actual construction work, and he certainly had never volunteered his time for free. But the words had come out before he could think about them carefully. I mean, I know the permit process and the safety requirements. I have some of the specialized tools you'd need. And I know Tom Barrett would help with the excavation if we asked him. I can't afford to pay you contractor rates, Elena said bluntly. I wasn't suggesting you pay me anything. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Why would you do that? It was a fair question, and Marcus found he didn't have a simple answer. Why was he offering to spend his weekends digging trenches and installing water lines for a customer he barely knew? Why was he willing to take on the liability and responsibility of a major plumbing project for free? Because, he said slowly, I think you deserve to succeed with this house. You've worked harder and learned more about construction in 6 months than most homeowners learn in a lifetime. And because every contractor who quoted you that Price is taking advantage of your situation. Elena continued to study his face as if trying to determine his real motives. There's no guarantee this project won't turn into a disaster. Old houses always have surprises, and working on the main water line means if we make a mistake, I could be without water for days. That's true, Marcus agreed. But if we don't do anything, you'll definitely be without water when that damaged section fails completely. And if the county inspector doesn't approve our work, I'll have to pay a contractor to redo everything anyway. Also true. Elena was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing her options. Marcus waited, realizing that her decision mattered to him more than it should have. He wanted her to say yes, not just because he wanted to help with the project, but because he wanted to spend time with her outside the confines of their customer relationship. All right, Elena said finally. But I have conditions. What kind of conditions? First, we do this as partners. I'm not hiring you, and you're not doing me a favor. We're working together on a project that benefits both of us. You get to tackle an interesting construction challenge, and I get access to your expertise and tools. Marcus nodded. Fair enough. What else? Second, if this project damages our business relationship or creates problems for your store, we stop immediately. I don't want to put your livelihood at risk because I'm too stubborn to hire a contractor. Agreed. Anything else? Third, Elena said, and Marcus detected a slight smile, you have to let me buy you dinner when we finish. It's the least I can do for someone willing to spend their weekends digging trenches. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. Elena's offer of dinner wasn't flirtatious or romantic. It was simply practical acknowledgement of his help. But it was also the first time she had suggested any interaction between them that wasn't purely business-related. "Deal," he said, over the following 3 weeks. Marcus discovered that working with Elena was unlike any collaboration he had ever experienced. She approached the waterline project with the same methodical competence she had shown with her other renovation work. But now Marcus could see her skills up close. Elena had researched every aspect of the installation before they started. She understood the county requirements, had obtained all necessary permits, and had developed a realistic timeline for each phase of the work. She coordinated with the utility companies to mark buried cables and gas lines. She even arranged for a temporary water source so they could work without leaving her completely without water if something went wrong. More importantly, Elena worked as a true partner. She didn't expect Marcus to handle the difficult parts while she watched, nor did she insist on doing everything herself to prove her independence. She evaluated each task based on their respective skills and experience, delegated responsibilities accordingly, and communicated clearly about problems and changes in plans. Marcus found himself looking forward to their work sessions in ways he hadn't anticipated. Elena was focused and efficient, but she also had a sense of humor about the inevitable frustrations of construction work. When they hit unexpected rock formations while digging the trench, she laughed and suggested they were probably uncovering ancient treasure. When a fitting didn't match the specifications they had been given, she calmly developed alternative solutions rather than getting frustrated. Working alongside Elena also gave Marcus insights into her character that he couldn't have gained through their brief store interactions. She was incredibly persistent but also pragmatic about when to change approaches. She was physically strong and willing to do heavy labor, but she also understood the value of planning and precision. Most importantly, she treated him as a competent partner rather than either a hired expert or a man she needed to impress. On the final day of the project, they completed the connection to the county main line and tested the entire system. Water flowed smoothly through 600 feet of new pipe, and the pressure at Elena's house was better than it had been since she bought the property. They had finished the work under budget and ahead of their original timeline. "We did it," Elena said as they watched clear water flow from the kitchen tap without any air bubbles or pressure fluctuations. "We did." Marcus agreed, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the successful completion of the project. That evening, Elena kept her promise about dinner, but instead of going to a restaurant, she cooked for Marcus in her newly functional kitchen. She prepared a simple meal of grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and homemade bread, serving it on a small table surrounded by renovation supplies and construction plans. "This is the first real meal I've cooked in this house," Elena said as they ate. "For months, I've been living on sandwiches and takeout because I didn't have reliable water or a working stove." "The kitchen is beautiful," Marcus said, looking around at Elena's careful restoration work. She had refinished the original cabinets, installed new countertops that matched the vintage style of the house, and created a functional workspace that honored the home's history while meeting modern needs. "Thank you. This room was actually the main reason I bought the house. When I saw the original wood and the size of the windows, I could imagine how it would look when it was properly restored." Marcus realized this was the first time Elena had shared anything about her motivations for buying the house. During their weeks of working together, they had focused entirely on technical aspects of the various projects, never discussing her personal reasons for taking on such a massive renovation. "What made you want to tackle a project like this?" he asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "I've always believed that things worth having are worth working for. When I saw this house, I knew it could be beautiful again, but only if someone was willing to invest the time and effort to do